Hello, everybody. You're listening to Sam Jae Has Questions. I'm your host, Sam Jae. How the hell are you? This is my first podcast since this Corona COVID-19 outbreak pandemic. My work is not too disrupted, but my heart and thoughts and all of that goodness goes out to the people who are suffering from this and will be suffering for quite some time. So I've been struck with a little bit of a decision on whether or not I want to continue putting out episodes the way I have. This episode today is my first remote guest, so bear with all the technical snafus and any sort of drop in quality, but this is the way it's going to be. And my studio that I record in has been shut down for the time being. So with that all out of the way, let's see where you're at. Where are you guys? I hope you're safe. I hope your families are all safe. Right now I'm in lovely Sherman Oaks at my apartment, working from home, being at home, staying at home, only leaving to go to the grocery store very hesitantly. And it's a time where there's, hopefully everyone is reflecting and wondering how the hell did we get here? And what exactly our lives are if we're not going out and doing things. I know I have definitely taken a look at just how often I was performing stand-up comedy and how much I took going to clubs and shows for granted. So I know for a fact right now I'm definitely missing a lot of the social circle and contact interactions that I normally have. Shout out to the Pack Theater. They did a telethon to raise money for the theater and raised over $10,000, which is great news. Everyone who put that together, you did an amazing job, and I'm so very proud to be at a theater that has a community that can come together and get each other's back. With that said, today my guest is Nate Johnson, who is actually a fellow Pack performer. We met through the sketch teams, and Nate Johnson was so much fun to talk to. He's helped me out in the past with some personal development and career planning. He is a improviser, an actor, a voiceover actor. He's a singer, and his new line of work that he's working in is leadership and mindset coach. Nate's got such a cool story. I'm so jealous of his story. Here's some of the things that Nate has done in his life. He sang opera. He was a whitewater rafting guide in New Zealand, a carny in Western Australia. He worked for Inc. magazine. He was the voice of all the live events for their conferences. He's an actor. He's also making his debut on podcasts on Sam Jae Has Questions. Oh, one little fun tidbit for you guys. Whenever you're listening tonight, Monday, March 30th at 8 p.m., I will be doing a virtual art show of all the art that I've been working on during this Corona pandemic. I've gone back to my roots of drawing and color pencils, believe it or not. That was my first medium that I chose to excel in. And I'm going to be doing a live stream, kind of just presenting the work, and there'll be photos up. So take a look at my Instagram, the bio, and I'll be live on Facebook as well. So that's just a fun thing that I'm doing. I hope all of you guys are finding great ways to fill your time, whether it's with personal exploration or just vegging out on the couch. Take this time to do nothing. I know I'm going to be doing the same. So thank you guys so much, and enjoy the episode. Welcome to Sam Jae Has Questions. My guest today is Nate Johnson. How does it feel?
Hey.
How does it feel to be on the podcast virtually?
Oh, I think I don't know if I've ever been on a podcast before. So,
this
might be my first podcast.
Oh man! All right, we're getting a lot of first times out of the way.
Yeah, but it's good to be here. Life's weird right now, but just embracing the weirdness and taking it one step at a time.
Okay, and just to set a little bit about who you are, Nate. You are a voiceover actor, a comedian. You are an improviser, a writer, and uh, what would you categorize your work right now currently? Like a life coach, or kind of like a what's that
Yeah.
term? Is that accurate?
Uh, it certainly can embrace that aspect. It's more along the lines of like leadership and mindset. So working with entrepreneurs, also artists, basically people who are self-motivated and have put themselves out there and already have built something. Oftentimes, doesn't have to be, but uh, yeah, I help coach those people through their mindset and through strategy. So I have two separate forms of income: the creative side, and then the coaching side.
Right, which is still plenty creative. You know, it
Yeah,
still
that's
has
very true.
the same sort of trial and error, and no two people you work with, I assume, are the same as far as what
No,
they need. Um,
not at all.
but we sort of met through other creative side, which is the pack theater and performing on a house sketch team. So, can you kind of set your history of performing, and then we can kind of get into what you're currently working on as well? So, where did you start? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm from Nebraska. That's where I was born and raised. Um, when I was in fourth grade, I was in my first musical. It was a Music Man. I just played one of the town's children. I may have had a line or two. I can't remember.
I'm like, let's see it.
Yeah, I don't even remember. It was. I might have done nothing, but I remember I just goofed off in the audition and ended up getting it, and I couldn't believe it. Um, but I had severe stage fright for ages. I grew up going to church. I'm not religious anymore, but in the Lutheran ELCA church, you sing a lot. So I grew up singing. I was always in choirs. In high school, I was in the band. I played trumpet. I was in the choir. I was a bass. I was also a jock. So I split those two things, being a jock and playing football and soccer and baseball and all sorts of sports with music. Luckily, my high school had both of those sides had a good integration, good relationship with each other. So I actually marched at halftime in my football gear when I was a freshman, because the freshmen could
Wow.
suit up for the varsity games, but I was a freshman. I didn't play. And so my band director is like, well, then you're going to be marching in the band. So I was the only one not in a band uniform. I was in my football gear playing trumpet and marching. So I stuck
Jeez.
out like a sore thumb. But
What an experience.
yeah, I had a lot of stage fright. I just wrote an article for Thrive Global. It was published a couple days ago, based on that story where my dad offered to pay me $100 to sing the national anthem, and I didn't do it because I was too
Wow.
scared. Yeah, so it was weird. Had a lot of stage fright up to my freshman year of college, where I had to perform because I was on a vocal scholarship. So I was trained in opera in college, along with my business degree. And then for a long time, I didn't perform. I lived in a few places overseas. And then I moved to New York. I sang in a church choir in the same church that's in Ghostbusters, the one with the big red door. So I sang there, even though at that time I wasn't religious anymore, but it was a great opportunity because those are like world-class singers. And then I studied drama there in New York. I wanted to act. I studied drama and then became a voiceover actor while I was there. And then I moved to LA, and I had the intention of getting into comedy because comedy made me happy. It was more along the lines of what I was good at. And yeah, went through the same fear with starting improv that I did with singing, but got over that.
Your
And
dad paid you another $100?
yeah, yeah, this time I was the one who was paying. Um, but yeah, went through the improv program, got an improv team, Big Yellow Taxi. then went through the sketch program and was on Very Famous for a couple of years. And now I do all the things that you said before, write, act, a lot of it based on comedy, but also drama. Don't have the opportunity to sing quite as much as I did at one time.
The floor is yours, Nate.
You got to pay me $100. But yeah, that leads us up to where we are now.
Awesome. So I'm curious about the sort of. It seems like you did so much before you got into doing comedy. So I just wonder, what was maybe a tool that you used to be a beginner again at something? I'd imagine you had graduated from college. I know you had also worked. You were working in New York in business.
Yeah, I worked for Inc. magazine, INC, not Inked, not the tattoo magazine. Yeah, I worked in the World Trade Center, which is crazy because my job prior to that was as a carny in Western Australia. So I had like no relevant experience, but somehow got a job there. And then they funded that. That was what I included in my contract. I was like, okay, well, if you're going to hire me, I want to be able to take voiceover classes and use my tuition reimbursement. So I used the $2,500 in tuition reimbursement that they give people to take classes that are relevant to their job. And that's how I got started in voiceovers. Mm-hmm. And in return, I started announcing all of their live events.
That's awesome.
Yeah, like, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the stage, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about. I was going through your website and I saw that you were the voice at the conventions.
Yes, yeah.
So have you ever been out somewhere talking and a stranger's kind of looking around and they're like, I know that voice from somewhere. Are you the Inc. management convention voice?
Oh my God, I would love it if that happened. That's never happened before.
Please don't make a big deal about it.
that I mean, I do my best like Bruce Buffer or Michael Buffer impression. So I don't sound anything like I do normally when I do that voice.
Like how you talk.
Yeah. But I actually still do that.
What the beginning of my question. Oh, really?
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. So, but you had to be a beginner at whether it's taking improv classes or starting sketch. And since you had this life beforehand, was there an intimidation of like being bad or at like, oh, like everyone's either they started earlier than me, or like, was there any sort of like negative voice in your head about starting, and how did you sort of push past that, if there was?
Oh, yeah.
If there wasn't, then yeah.
No, there definitely was. I mean, yeah, I was really scared. Yeah, I just was afraid to fail. I was afraid to look like an idiot. I took way longer than I could have. Looking back, I was just very indecisive about getting into it. All the things with age, I'm 35 now, but yeah, so I felt like I was late, but then, the desire outweighed the fear. And, I would quell that desire by reading, I would quell that fear by reading, about other actors who had come up later in their years. I think it was Taraji P. Henson who moved out here at 27 with a baby, 27 as an African-American woman with a baby. I mean, that's a huge risk, especially when she came out here. So there were all these people who had achieved so much. And, like for me to not take that chance was I just couldn't. That was the other thing. I couldn't live with myself if I didn't take that chance. I know that sounds hyperbolic, but I guess for me, it's not like I would, not go on living, but there would certainly be this acid in my gut that would tell me that I never took that chance. And then there was one quote that I always go back to whenever I'm feeling afraid about like my age or whatever. And that's from Earl Nightingale. and he says something along the lines of, you can, it doesn't matter how much time will pass in trying to accomplish your goal, the time is going to pass anyway. So that time is going to pass. I might as well be spending it doing something that I love or that I want to strive for.
Yeah. What is the why do you think there is that expectation that people put on themselves as far as like moving out here and how long it's going to take to make it, and after a certain point they're a failure? Because that's a big thing that often for me I feel like there is no real moment of failure because I feel like I haven't even stepped far enough out onto the ledge to really take a chance to completely like lose my feet underneath me and be a failure. So like I guess maybe is there micro failures or what is like why do we view that as such? It's so black and white when really it's like, oh, I forgot my line in a sketch, I'm a failure. That's the
Yeah.
jump that sometimes people make. So what's a healthy relationship with failure that you think?
Well, as far, a couple thoughts, two different thoughts. One, why do people act like that? I think with a broad paintbrush, it's cultural. Like for example, in Iceland, people have a completely different mindset. They just there's no expectation for you to, or there's just a very healthy environment for you to just practice and do what you love. And so many people just do what they love, and it's not a matter of being successful. They're just like, I'm a good painter, I'm a good potter, I'm a good this or that. This is what I'm going to do. So a large part of it's cultural, and a large part of it's biological. That we don't. Our body tells us, or our mind tells us not to do something because it's trying to keep us safe. People who go after something that they want are going to be putting themselves into a position where they're going to get hurt and they're going to go through setbacks but yeah, that's a lot of people just don't want to face that. I'd say though that my relationship with fear has changed dramatically for a couple reasons. One is stoicism, and watching a lot of videos on stoicism, reading a lot of stoicism, just remembering that like this time is going to pass, like none of this really matters in the end. The only thing that's going to matter is the action you take now. So a lot of it's stoicism. And also I find fear to be a good trigger for realizing that you're wanting to change. If you're fearful of something, chances are you really want to do that thing. And that should be an indicator that you should continue to strive for it. And anytime I get through fear, I always feel empowered and I feel courageous. It doesn't make it any easier, but it does give me a foundation on which to stand. And that is that I want to be a courageous person, and I don't want to be somebody who regretted not taking a chance. I always feel more pain when I didn't take the chance. Always.
Yeah. What do you now? Right now, people are very fearful for this corona pandemic. There's a lot of information. There's a lot of misinformation. They called it an infodemic as well. Just no one really knows exactly what's going on. What do you think is the silver lining with this, if there's any, about just how we deal with our time, how we deal with ourselves on a personal level? And I mean, speaking from the creative side of it, how have you learned anything or noticed anything about yourself in these last 5 to 6 days of socially isolation? Is there anything that you've gleaned from that?
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, have a positive nature. I'm positive by nature. I think when we were talking about fear, everybody has fears, and that's just unavoidable. And I think fear is a good thing. But to allow yourself to be ruled by fear, I think is a severe misstep. And the thing is, like, you can live in fear and not realize that there's any other way to live because you're living in your own fishbowl. So I think to be around people, to read books, to watch videos around people who are courageous or who are at least calm in the storm is really beneficial. And I still have to do that too, even though I'm a naturally positive person. Silver linings. I think there's always a silver lining. No matter how bad something is, I just believe that there's a silver lining. I don't get why people stay super negative. Like, I just can't imagine living like that. Like, what are you going to do? Quit? You're just going to quit everything? Like, I do get a little bit impatient around people who just get into hysterics. I just can't deal with that. You're either moving forward or you're standing still, and I just can't get into or surround myself with that mentality. Silver linings. Oh my gosh. Like, people spending time with people, helping each other out. One of the things that I've found, especially in suicide prevention, when I was a suicide prevention counselor, is when people get into a bad mood or depressed, they're oftentimes just swirling around in their own head. And one key to get out of that is to go and help somebody else. So the opportunity to get on the phone and just tell somebody like how you feel, or just get on the phone or just text them and say hi. I mean, it's such a good opportunity to reconnect. I think that people have lived a life of, we've lived pretty good lives here. We've gone through 9/11. We've gone through a few, like H1N1, some things that really scared us. But man, you listen to something like you read history, or you listen to something like Hardcore History, the podcast. Life used to be horrifying.
Brutal.
Yeah, horrifying. And for many people living today, it's horrifying. To have a chance to toughen up a little bit. I mean, maybe people are going to be really pissed off if I say this, but I think that people need to toughen up and realize what's really valuable in life. And it's not to say it's not going to be easy. It's not to say that I don't get frustrated or find it hard or unfair. But I think there's some massive silver linings people can get out of this if they just look for it. Surround themselves with people like yourself who look for the silver linings, because you got to look for it or else it's going to pass by it.
Yeah, this has been definitely a illuminating moment on other people's relationship with their art or their jobs, specifically in entertainment industry, seeing what performers are posting about with not being able to perform, and like how just maybe the unhealthy relationship that some of us do have with our craft, and the lack of balance that we do have, that the moment we can't, either go to shows, go to mics, perform, that we're just like completely out of it. We're completely out of whack just by that. I've noticed not performing, I've had so many different insights on my writing and my voice that now I appreciate going on stage and having something more significant to say, and it means a little bit more. So I'm in no rush to get back. This is time for me this is time that I put off for years.
I remember you and I talked about that when we went out for coffee. Like, you had wanted to, do your movie. You had wanted to pursue something that was more valuable to you for a long time and just not pulled the trigger on it. I mean, one thing I struggle with is laziness. I'm inherently lazy, and I've got to remember to keep myself on track, because even though there's no show coming up, no sketch show or whatever, like, I got to remember to keep writing. So I struggle with that. One thing that you asked that I forgot to mention, you were asking about misinformation. I mean, people are in different circumstances. Some people have to work on social media. I try to stay away from social media as much as possible. And as far as information, I try to pick one source that I trust and then just ignore everything else. Like, whether that's the CDC, whether that's whoever you trust. I just try to follow the one reasonable source, because it's not like somebody else is going to have new information that another source doesn't have.
Right.
I just try to whittle down to one thing that I trust and go with that.
So what have you been keeping busy with before this sort of shutdown of everything? What is your
Before
schedule
or
been? Yeah,
right
before.
now?
Yeah, before, and maybe how has it changed?
Sure. I was really focused on the acting side, on branding myself, getting my reels and everything together and my headshots together to go out and really promote myself and brand myself. That kind of came to a halt. I was really focused on taking booking classes through Amy Lyndon. Little plug for her. She's amazing. Yeah, I was focused a lot on the acting side. And I also write a lot, and I wanted to pitch films and television shows and write my own sketches. So I also think that I just allowed myself to not use my day quite as well as I could have. Definitely didn't plan ahead all the time and allow myself to get carried through the day and be willy-nilly. And now I feel like is a time to really take advantage of when no one has any expectations of me, and to go forward. I was also coaching a lot. That was I had a lot of head things in my, a lot of negativity to deal with for myself, of like not getting together with people, not asking them how they're doing, for fear that they would feel like I was selling them something, or I was being inauthentic, or not feeling like I was good enough, having imposter syndrome that I could actually help people. Yeah. But now during COVID, it's a really nice time to actually get on the phone, call people, let them know that they're not alone, let them, if they are striving for something, some big goal, let them know that I'm here to serve them and be a resource that they can reflect off, help them reframe, so that by the time that this is all over with and the dust settles, that they can be ahead of where they were instead of at the same level or behind.
Yeah.
So.
That's great. One of my favorite questions to ask people, Nate, is called the life billboard. And if you had a billboard on the intersection of Sunset and La Cienega, and it could have any message or image on it, what would you have on there?
Whoa, that's a good question. So I don't have any. One thing with being a coach is I don't want people to think that I have think that I have some universal answer that help anybody, because that's what self-help gurus do.
Yeah. I
can only take my own advice for myself. I would say that, also I'm a little bit of a hardball in this area. Part of me wants to say, don't waste your life. Okay. I feel like, well, first of all, that's my biggest fear, is wasting my life and my potential. But it took me a while to get to that, and I feel like that would sound kind of abrasive to a lot of people. But I would say, man, it's hard to think of things that haven't been said before. I guess I would say, breathe. One thing I try to do with my clients and myself is to whittle. And one thing that, you and I talked about when we talked, it was, what's a domino goal? Like, what can you do now? Something simple that will make everything else easier. And I think that breathing is one of the things that can help settle you. It's really simple. It might seem trite, but I would just say breathe. Breathe. Yeah. Luckily, this isn't an airborne virus that we know of. So I think that it would be good advice. If it was airborne, then maybe it wouldn't be as good of advice. But I would say either breathe or or, you know, call someone you love or something. Because I think both of those help recenter you and take your mind outside of yourself. So I wouldn't focus on something that people could do for themselves. I would focus on something that would get them outside their own minds.
Their own minds. Now, I want to switch gear to some life stories from you. I'm fascinated uh, from your whitewater rafting days in New Zealand.
Yeah.
And I say that because the first time I went whitewater rafting was in Colorado. And I remember watching the employees there, and I'm just like, that's what I want to do. I want to be that guy. And it's still a goal of mine. I'm like, maybe I should just go and be the, buy some Tivas and go whitewater raft guiding people.
Yeah.
So let me hear some, like, how did you get into that line of work, and was it hard to leave? What was the story?
Oh my God. I was pulled towards it. It was one of those things similar to acting. Like I couldn't not do it. I would like kick myself if I didn't do it. So I grew up in Nebraska, which most coasters don't know anything about, anything between LA and Chicago and New York. So Nebraska borders Colorado, even though they're both vastly different states, different types of states. Nebraska's super flat. Colorado's got the Rockies, obviously. So I grew up like every other summer we'd go rafting or something along those lines. But I started rafting at a pretty early age. And similar to you, I saw how much fun these people were having. And when I got into college, I think that one thing, maybe it's just me, but I got bored really quickly of things. Like I would get bored of my toys, and this is something that I still struggle with, and I still have in me, and I have to remind myself to be cognizant of and be aware. But I get bored easily, and I get lazy easily, and I got bored of my hometown. That's why I moved to California. I went to school at California Lutheran University in Thousand Oaks. But everything's set out for you. Your assignments are set out for you. Everybody's doing predictable things. They're going and working at their normal jobs in the summer. They're doing their school during the year. And for me, I was going to either go back home to Nebraska and be a lifeguard, which is a fun job, but it's certainly not story worthy. And I always admired people who had stories. So I was like, you know what? What's the most adventurous thing that I think that I could do? That would be a fun story and would perhaps open other doors for me. And it was being a whitewater rafting guide. I was like, I can do that. So I went to Northern California, and out of like 30 companies on the American River, one had a training program, and it was a week-long training program. You had to pay $600, which was a lot as a 20-year-old. At the time, it's still a lot of money. And you weren't guaranteed a job. It was a week long, and you were not guaranteed a job at the end. So my consequence, if I didn't pass and wasn't good enough, is that I'd have to go back home when I had already told everybody I was going to be a rafting guide, which would be more painful than $600. Yeah. So I was not good for like the first 6 days. I was awful. And our coach, our trainer, was this little New Zealand guy named Flitch, and he was just such a ball buster, and everybody was just hazing all the newbies. But finally, I got through it, and I was actually the first guide to be able to take a crew down. Now, mind you, the best person in our class got another job on another river somewhere else, so I was like maybe the second or third best, but it was scary. I spent like sleepless nights thinking I'd have to go back home to Nebraska, but I got the job. It was awesome. It was like the best summer. It was like living in a Mark Twain novel, whether it was Life on the Mississippi or Huck Finn. It was like you just play in the river. You would drink at night. You would take people down the river during the day. It was awesome. And by the way, little hope for you, if you still want to do this, there are plenty of weekend warriors who were like teachers in San Francisco during the day and would come out and be guides on the weekend. Super fun. And when I graduated college, I had a similar feeling where I didn't want to get a desk job. I was sick to my stomach that I had gone through 21 years of school, and all that people wanted was to know my Microsoft Suite skills. And I was just like sick of it. So a friend of mine called me and he was like, I'd like my best friend from high school, one of my two best friends from high school, called me and he was like, I want to move to New Zealand. Do you want to come with me? At the time I was thinking of going to Brazil, but I was thinking, well, yeah, this will be cool. I know people down there. Everybody I worked with, sorry, I forgot to mention this, in California as a rafting guide was a Kiwi, was from New Zealand.
Okay.
So I was like, I know people down there. I could get a job down there. 3 days after buying our tickets, he was hit by a truck and killed.
Oh my God.
So that was my first experience with tragedy in life, personal tragedy. But I went in October. My grandfather also died like a week before I left. So it was a very weird time, but I went down there and I worked on the Dart River, which in the Lord of the Rings is the valley where Saruman's castle is. In the movie, it's grass and it's a big castle. Obviously, that's digitally added, but also that valley is not grass. It's a braided glacial river. And
Wow.
I took people down there, and that got me started on like a 2-year adventure. And it was unbelievable. We'd take jet boats up, which are boats that can sit like 25 people, but they run like jet skis. So they skim across the top of the water. And then we would float down, and it was pinch worthy. I would pinch myself thinking I got paid to do this. You should do it, by the way.
Did you feel like you were doing it in like honor of your friend too? Like, was that, I imagine that was really hard. You're like, well, do I still go?
No, no, I didn't. Man, death's weird. I don't know. Have you ever experienced like tragedy like that? Like super soon to somebody? Have you ever experienced that?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's weird.
Yeah. They're just gone in a sense. And
Yeah.
I had a cousin that passed away tragically. She was 27 and like kind of very freak passing. And it's like, you never even really assume or like understand how that could have happened in a sense.
Yeah. It's tough. It's also, I had a lot of self-judgment. Like at the time, we grew up together, but he lived in Minnesota and I lived in California. I didn't see him every day. So my regular life was not affected.
I see.
So I remember like crying a bunch the first maybe hour or 2 hours. And then like I didn't cry, and I thought that I should be crying, and I thought that I should be feeling something, or should be feeling that sense that people get a lot where they're like, I should have spent more time. And I never got any of that feeling. And I didn't think that that would serve anybody. I just really, really appreciated the time that we had together in my life and his life. And I appreciated the parts of his personality that were now part of my personality. So I didn't live like to honor him. I just wasn't going to stop my life. Like,
Yeah.
I didn't even go to his funeral.
Because you were in.
No, his parents wanted me to be a pallbearer, but I had already had this vacation planned with my dad in Boston. And I was like, well, am I going to go to the funeral, or am I going to use this time in my life, this one cool opportunity, which again, who knows? Death just teaches you a lot of things, and everybody comes from a different angle. But for me, it taught me like time is really, really precious, and I didn't want to waste it. And did I want to reflect and be there with, a bunch of people and reflect on my friend who had already, this sounds so harsh, but reflect on my friend who had already passed? Or did I want to live my life and be there with my dad and share that moment with my dad? And that's not to say that one would be right or one would be wrong, but what I chose was to be there with my dad and have a great experience that built upon both of our lives together.
Yeah.
Um,
I
so
think
yeah,
I think what you're saying is that like everyone has a different sort of relationship to death, but then each death is out of a completely different context. Whether it's like I've lost grandparents who were in their 80s and they were sick, and like I don't remember being as sad about it as when like I lost my father when he was 40 from cancer, or when I lost my cousin from an accident, she was 27. Those were the ones that were harder to make sense of. But like grandparents that I got to have for my whole life, essentially, you know, you kind of, that one's a little bit more expected, and you're like, okay, yeah, they've been alive for 80 plus years. They lived a good life. But it's tough for the ones where like, man, that person's life barely got started. You know, like I had a family member's son who passed away. He was like 3, and the idea just hit me so hard that like this kid will never, like, he wanted to be a firefighter, and like he loved fireman toys, and he never got the opportunity to, you know, do any of that. And it sort of made me more appreciative and aware of that, like, well, I better like get on my thing. You know, like it's, I have more time than he did, and that makes it like more, like you said, don't waste your time, don't waste your life.
yeah. And I'm sorry about all those happen in your life.
Yeah.
So much of that type of stuff and is personal, and the don't waste my life thing is not meant to be, I really try not to give people like trite answers to things. These are just things that have helped me. And so I hope that your audience doesn't take this as something like, that you could get off the back of a tea packet or in a fortune cookie. Like, these are just things that have helped me. So yeah, those kind of things just remind me to not waste my life. And I think about them a lot, not just like saying that to myself. So yeah, death, but
Yeah, I think the important piece that I've learned about that sort of information, whether it's like a saying like that or uh, is that those stop applying at a certain point. You learn a new thing, you read a new book, you hear new advice. It would be very unrealistic to say that you're going to apply this, like, oh yeah, he told me this, and like I just applied that for the next 40 years of my life, and like never updated it, or never
yeah,
like it's constantly changing. I'm always reading something and I'm like, oh, okay, this makes so much sense. And then all of a sudden, like, I'm like, actually, that doesn't make sense to me anymore. That idea is no longer working. And
yeah.
I get rid of it.
Or like if you read a book like 10 years apart, it's going to mean something different to you than it did the first time you read it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
it's that this kind of stuff is like really personal to everybody. But I think that there's a lot to be gained. I really like the questions you're asking, by the way. But also, sorry, I didn't mean to veer off into death when you were asking me another question. Now we've taken a tangent. So
No, that's good. That's what I enjoy most about sort of having these set questions, but then willing to go off. I'm kind of like reaching the end of the prepared portion of the interview. I'm open to anything that I might not have asked you, whether about your career. I know you mentioned the work that you've done on your reel and the branding of that. Maybe talk a little bit about uh, how you figured out what your either brand of acting was, or how does one do that for people who are interested in acting but don't know
sure,
really where to start.
sure. Can I ask you a question first?
No, you can. Yeah.
um, okay. Number one, I would love to know, because this will help me to guide my answers. Um, what are you hoping that your audience gets from your podcast in particular? Maybe not this single episode, but from your podcast, what are you hoping that people get out of it, or how are you hoping to share with people? Is it based around acting, or is it based around?
It's I think it's based around anyone who is aspiring to be more than what they are, or who might have followed something, but they find it's not really panning out, and
Okay,
are looking for a little bit of inspiration and reassurance that it's okay. It didn't, you can always adjust. You can always, retool. You can always become a whitewater raft guide and quit podcasting. Like just
cool.
giving people that what what is it called when you give someone permission? I want people to know they have permission to be inspired, to not be inspired. Like just it's something that's important for me to have that in the message.
Cool.
Maybe there's a better way to say that. What do you think that ultimately boils down to?
You and I
Like,
can, and we should have more conversations about this, because I could talk about this stuff for ages. So first of all, I think that there's no inherent meaning in life. I think that you have to create it for yourself. I think that is, I don't, and this is, I'm not, again, not being trite about this. I don't believe in an afterlife or a God or anything. And I came through these, it's not like I just threw it off,
yeah,
but there's plenty of stuff that's behind that. But where I come from now is like, you got to take responsibility for yourself and come up with your own meaning in the face of everything. The fact that everybody's going to die, everybody is going to die. This all sounds really, it's kind of dark, but to me, it provides a lot of strength, because I go into an audition and it's not, I have all the fears, all the butterflies, everything, all the insecurities that everybody else has. It's just natural. But then I help recenter myself by being like, none of this stuff matters. Like, I want to be the best because I like getting a role, and I don't need to explain it beyond that. I just like winning. I like succeeding. Not that, and who doesn't like the feeling of winning? I should say that. I like the feeling of winning. I like the feeling of pushing myself forward. I like the feeling of being in control. So there's so many things that are outside of your control. I think it's a complete waste of time, which goes back to COVID, focusing on things that are outside of your control. Like, just recenter yourself on I have to recenter myself on what's in my control, and then try to get as many things as possible under my control. So in doing the reels, for example, like, man, everybody has their own opinion, from your manager to your agent to your coach to your family. Everybody has an opinion. But at the same time, like, I can put together a reel that I like and use their suggestions. I can put together a headshot session and hire a coach to help me put together a good headshot session. I can submit for roles. I can reach out to casting directors. I can write every day. These are all things that are under my control, whether I get cast, whether my show gets picked up, whether anybody likes my headshots, whether anybody likes my reel. Like, these are things I cannot control. And for the longest time, indecision and not knowing kept me from pursuing acting. It wasn't just the fear of thinking that I was too old or not talented enough. It was a lot of just like, I have no idea what to do. And had I just taken one afternoon or maybe a week to just figure out what's the first step to take, I could have saved myself years. And that goes for a lot of things in my life. I could just cut these things down by just taking a moment to sit and focus rather than distracting myself. And I struggle with this even today. And when I say today, I mean literally today. So yeah, I just try to whittle down to what's in my control, not focus on what's out of my control. And then in the process, try to get as much under my control as I can. And that really helps guide my day and my advancement in my career.
That's a
And then
big thing.
and then I try not, it's not that I try not to think about what other people think, but I at least try to give it its own context and not think that it has any influence over me.
Gotcha.
It's hard though. It's like I'm not better than anybody. I deal with the reason why I think about all this stuff is because I'm constantly triggered to be fearful and every day. So I constantly have to remind myself.
Is that from just your growing up in a place that maybe like a perfectionist type of parent,
No,
or
in fact,
anything
the
deeper
opposite.
than that? Really?
No, the opposite. My parents were so accepting of everything that I did. Like I had no struggle. Like, you know how a lot of people are really successful because they're um, they have a chip on their shoulder. I never had a chip on my shoulder about that stuff. Like I had just a great life. My parents would have been just perfectly happy had I done something else, or something like become a teacher or whatever. But they knew that I didn't want to stay in Nebraska. They knew that I didn't want to have a normal life. And what I mean by normal is just something because it's normal. I'm not saying that a normal life is bad, but they knew that I wanted to do something other than what they had done or what
Yeah.
other people in my town had done. And so they kind of wouldn't accept me staying home. They were like, and they knew that I wouldn't anyway. But yeah, so they were
Yeah.
always supportive of me being an adventurous, but beyond being adventurous, they didn't care what I did. As long as I was supporting myself financially, and I wasn't being some a-hole, they were fine with what I did. So as far as determination in succeeding, I had to. That was all me having to just be like kicking my ass so that I wouldn't be a lazy bum, and then surrounding myself with people who were doing things that I wanted to do. And
Yeah, I guess a little bit on the brand. How you talked about branding yourself. Maybe just a quick
sure,
what the process like was for that, because I have watched your reel. I know you know, if we look at branding, it's like you mean like you can play cops, you can play like the best friend, you can play a military guy. Is that what you mean by branding, like your type?
Yep, that's exactly what I mean. So at the beginning, like, yeah, I would love to sell a show and just do any part that I want in that show. But so I have that side of me who wants to do that. But at the same time, I also want to be cast in as many shows as I possibly can, or television, or films. So I first of all, I hired a branding coach. I was
Oh
tired of trying to
wow.
figure it out for myself. Yeah. So the first person I hired was Wendy Alane Wright. She is she runs her own stuff, and she runs a Facebook page called Talent Managers for Actors. I hired her. Highly recommend her. And then I hired Amy Lyndon as my booking coach, and then she also gives branding classes. And then I went through this course called Career Activate. And so there are different layers based off what I thought that I was missing. I wasn't trying to just take everything I could. I just thought, okay, well, what element is still missing? And I used those resources instead of trying to figure it all out myself. I was like, what's my branding? And they helped me whittle down to, my type is, for now, is a firefighter, law enforcement, military, young father, a teacher, mentor, coach, aloof uncle or brother, or aloof dad, jock, or former jock, former frat boy, something like that. Also, like charming aspect on like maybe the business side, or the even douchebag. Although I don't like playing douchebag as much. But yeah, they helped me whittle down to what my package was. From there, I could do student films and stuff to build up my reel on what roles I thought that I could be cast in. And then for my headshot session, I could take that information to my photographer, let him know, him or her, that these are the types that I think I'll be playing.
Cool.
And yeah, so it all started with hiring a coach. it's to me so worth the money, and because it takes years off the process, in my experience.
Wow, that's an amazing. I was writing down some of those, but maybe I can get
I'll send them to you.
yeah, send them, and I'll include them in the show description if people want to do some research on their end for looking for some talent management for actors.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
Yeah.
Nate, I think you've answered all of my questions. How does it feel?
Feels good. Like I do feel a little self-conscious, like sometimes I wonder if I'm just, can I cuss on this podcast?
Yeah.
But sometimes I've already cussed, but sometimes I wonder if I'm just like spitting out bullshit, and like it's cool to have different, like an interesting view on life, but it also, man, I can't stand like platitudes and stuff. So sometimes I am self-conscious if I am saying platitudes myself, or saying some universal thing that I think everybody should follow. So, but besides my own insecurities, this was really cool. You're a great interviewer. I obviously really enjoy our relationship that we have. And I was happy that you gave me a platform to, yes, say a little bit about myself. So it was really nice. And I felt very at home. Knowing that other people are going to hear this is cool. But of course, I have like insecurities surrounded with that. But those things are good feelings to have and good feelings to confront. And yeah, I'm just happy to be here in general. So I appreciate you having me on.
Amazing. Thank you so much for being on the show, Nate. That was great, right, guys? Follow Nate, all the descriptions below. Check out his recommendations and his shout out to a young Silver Lake artist. His Instagram is below there. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll talk to you guys soon.